Well, back in the early days of television, all the drama you saw was shot in the studio with wobbly sets, producing what were often pretty dodgy pictures. The equipment was just too bulky to leave the building, except on very special occasions. Thank you. Well, all that changed in the mid-60s. Lightweight 16mm film cameras were introduced, and the TV studio play shot on video was left behind. Unless you had real locations, real ships perhaps, no one took TV drama very seriously. Film was the flavour of the month, and a new form of TV drama was born, the one-off made-for-television film. Well, since then, film has done all the running, leaving video very much the poor relation. Channel 4 and lately BBC have done much to encourage this with their prestigious made-for-TV film slots. Film on 4 and Screen 2. But ironically, the 80s have seen video catching up with, and some would say overtaking film in terms of quality. For instance, you could never do this on film. Mind you, who'd want to? But apart from the rather overused wacky effects that most people associate with video, some TV drama is now waking up to the possibilities video offers. Channel 4 are launching their first video drama slot, and the BBC series Screenplay will be commissioning work specially intended to be made on video in the studio. So what will TV drama do with these new possibilities? Will video at last be able to play with the big boys?
Over the last 6 or 7 years since Channel 4 started its policy of film on 4, the success of that policy has meant that the BBC have done more films, ITV companies are now competing in the same market, and video has been neglected.
I think the main prejudice is that film has a look about it, which is widely believed that video cannot achieve. An atmosphere, a depth of field, a subtlety of visual effect. That, I would say, is the main thing. The subsidiary one is perhaps a whole fantasy about feature films, that an awful lot of drama directors in television aspire to be directors of feature films, and the more they can use television as a practice ground or an audition piece for the feature film movie that they'd like to make, the happier they are.
It's ridiculous. We have a very thriving television industry. We hardly have a movie industry at all. Television is so exciting. I don't know why they don't want to stay in television and contribute to that. But everybody wants to be in the movies.
The obsession with the TV movie is far from the origins of television drama, which began with multi-camera studio productions mostly recorded on video.
Emma, have some strawberries.
I am doing.
Are they delicious?
Yes, they're lovely.
The reason why we did all these studio dramas, because there wasn't any other way of shooting them. In those days, you didn't have portable cameras like this one. In those days, you couldn't look into the camera and talk to the camera like this, because it would be considered to be unconventional. You had to, and you recreated reality. You took theatre actors and rehearsed them like you would a play. And then you said, well, perform it now.
Oh, God.
I'll leave the bedroom light on.
It'll keep you awake.
I want to be awake when you come to bed.
You had multi-cameras. You had 3 or 4 cameras, 5 cameras if you were lucky, which in the early days hardly moved. And the actors were blocked into close, wide, etc., etc. And if they got up, they panned across the room.
At that time, the studio was central to drama, because drama was still much closer to its roots in the theatre. And there has been, I think, a steady progression from drama that was rooted in theatre and a limited number of sets, which could be fitted into a studio, to drama that is much more closely related to film and to rapid changes of place.
Didn't even tell him I was going. I sent him a card when I got down there. That house over there. Yeah, that one with the broken steps. That's why.
I don't think there's any one single thing has displaced the studio. I think it's a number of things. Partly it was technology, the development of smaller, more lightweight cameras. Partly it was the way that writers started to go. Writers started to write scripts for whatever reason, maybe just the climate around, that were much more filmic.
I think it's fair to say that because film actually takes you out onto location, that almost immediately, predicates a kind of realism. It doesn't always, but it does do that. And there's no doubt that if you were in actual fact confined within the four walls of a studio, then you know very well that you've got to ring the changes as best you can.
The young drama directors at that period all rushed out and went on to film to do the exciting drama of the period. But then I imagine what happened was that they saw the comparison between studio-bound overall lit productions that had to be lit for 4 or 5 cameras, which couldn't particularly move very much, which looked flat and boring, and in comparison to their 16mm films, which were of course more grainy than 35, meant they had a texture over them which is quite nice looking. People came to like those film pictures as opposed to the unpleasant sort of the sort of smearing, the blurred pictures that you got from the video tube cameras.
It was another 15 years before video technology could compete with film, but by the late 70s, some television films were actually being made on video.
You see, I don't really see the difference between the two. I mean, I've been shooting films on video for years. When I shoot a film, I don't shoot it any differently.
A lot of people I know think that Barchester Chronicles, to take an example from as a serial, was made on film. It wasn't. It was entirely on video. I know people who think that Testament of Youth was made on film. Some of it was on film, but the bulk of that was also made in a studio. If you take Boys from the Black Stuff, some of that was video, some of it was film. You'd have to be really expert to tell which was which.
About time, too.
Pardon?
I've been waiting here 40 minutes.
Well, the quicker we get this over with, the quicker you can go.
Yeah, right.
You're not in a hurry to go anywhere, are you?
No, I don't have to be back at work for ages yet.
Take it that was meant to be a joke.
Yeah, a sick one.
And I wrote it as what you saw, which was using the video as a complete space to recreate and to create 3 dimensions. I went out of my way to use all kinds of graphics forms, all kinds of moving images, all kinds of still pictures. An enormous amount of music was enhanced. Scenes broke into other scenes. Layer upon layer of images came across. And I purposely did this, and I would do it again if the subject matter came about. I find this a very exciting form of drama.
There have been some programs made, for example, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which had a very imaginative use of graphics and stylized elements.
So this is it? We're going to die?
In television, up until about a year ago, the standard electronic cameras that were used by everybody employed tube technology. Tube cameras have a whole lot of problems. They have smearing, which you'll have seen on news programs where a camera's out in the dark, say in a riot situation, and he pans about, and you've got a whole lot of bright street lamps against the dark sky, and you get trails left after them. And this phenomena reduces the contrast, and so the pictures don't look as nice because they've less contrast, the colours aren't as bright, and the whole picture is extremely blurred. Now, this problem is no longer true, really, because a new type of camera has come along, which is called a CCD, which this one is. And these cameras will allow you to pan across lights. They have a higher contrast range by a great deal, and these are replacing the tube cameras. And many people feel that the CCD cameras produce nicer looking pictures than film. The electronic post-production methods are largely, the new ones, are more efficient in many respects than film. The sky is the limit, assuming that one can afford to do the effect required. So we have done things like fill Oxford Street with pigs, fill a church with 100 monkeys all typing, when obviously it's almost impossible to even get one monkey to type. So it allows you to shoot in impossible environments, difficult environments, or in environments that you create from nothing.
Such effects are expensive, confined mainly to big-budget promos or commercials. But there's also a deeper problem. Today's writers and directors have almost no tradition of working on video.
I think the image of studio drama has become tarnished since the golden days of the 60s. And there's a whole generation of writers and directors who have grown up in the 80s and seen 90% of single drama on television, on film, not out of the studio. And I think that that generation needs to be persuaded that studio does have potential and is an exciting area for them to contribute to.
There's a generation of writers and directors who hardly think in video terms at all. It will be very interesting to see whether they can be introduced to video, introduced to some of the fascinating things you can do, particularly the effects with CSO, with Paintbox, ADO, Harry. They have an enormous variety of names, but they're ways of playing with pictures which are not really open to film at all.
If there is a move towards studio drama, it could actually be disastrous at this moment in time, because a whole lot of people could hear about the new technology. A number of directors could be encouraged to do it and demand of their producers that they'd be allowed to shoot it on video. They go into a studio, which happens to be one with 20-year-old cameras, and the experience is horrendous and ghastly. And that director never ever wants to shoot on video again, and the producer, indeed, won't allow any of his directors to do so.
There has been a regrettable tendency, I think, when a film script has not quite been able to command the attention to finance it properly, of saying, oh, right, let's make it into a studio then. And it's that kind of thinking about studio that needs to change. And I'd like to be commissioning specifically for the studio projects that could only exist within that arena. And I think it's only by doing that and by running a series of studio plays which use the studio's potential to the full, we're going to be able to re-establish a clear identity for it, and that will then reap its own rewards in the future.